You are. Yes. Thank you for getting it right the first time.
Very happy that you could be here. Thank you so much. He has been doing town halls at various libraries throughout the system, so we're very excited to have him here. Keep an eye on our calendar because we have other sessions of Know Your Local Government coming up with different people representing the county as well as more local offices. So thanks a lot and thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Hi
everybody.
Is recording okay?
It's fine with me, yeah. I left this up, but if you have any questions about any of this information or you want me to put it back up at the end of this presentation, I'd be glad to do it. So, my name is Dan Imar Blair. I'm the Dutchess County Comptroller. I started on January 1st. There was an election last year for the Comptroller's office, and I started in January, so I've been in office for about 8 months. And one of the things that I learned last year when I was introducing myself to the public was a lot of people just didn't even know what they didn't know who I was, but they didn't know what the Comptroller was. It started with my mother, who I called, and I said, "Mom, I'm going to be running for Comptroller." She goes, "I'm so proud of you, honey. What is that?" So I had to explain to my mother what a Comptroller is. But that was something that I really took to heart last year because I did have to spend so much time talking about what this office actually is. That I thought that when I got into office, I was going to make an effort to kind of explain the importance of the work of this office. And that's what we've been doing. This is our fifth. We have 7 public town halls scheduled, all of them at libraries. So thank you, libraries. You've been amazing the whole way. And this is our 5th of 7. We've been all around Dutchess County, and we'll be in Rhinebeck on Wednesday, and we'll be in Beekman next month. So the question that I wanted to answer first for everybody is, what is a Comptroller? So the Comptroller is the Chief Accounting Officer of an organization. So in Dutchess County, as Chief Accounting Officer, my job is to make sure that our ledgers are maintained in an appropriate and accurate way, that our numbers are all adding up, that they've been reviewed and double checked, and basically to say that Dutchess County's finances are sound. This was set up only in 1968. So prior to 1968, Dutchess County only had a sheriff, a clerk, and a district attorney. Starting in 1968, they had a county legislature, a county executive, and a comptroller. The comptroller's office is entirely independent of all of the other offices. I don't report to the sheriff, the county executive, the legislature, or anybody. I report directly to you. And what I do as the chief accounting officer is we are constantly monitoring to make sure that all of the payments that go out of the county are accurate and appropriate and done correctly, and that we are reporting the information that we learn to you. And I take that very seriously. Because I report to you, I am here to share information that is a public good and a public service. All the information in this PowerPoint belongs to you. It's your possession. So the number one question that we get, however, is how to pronounce Comptroller and where does that word come from. So the French word comptoir, to count the rolls, to count the roll. The Anglification of that would be counting the rolls, control. That Comptroller is the preferred term, but in government we tend not to use, Controller is the preferred term, but in government we try not to use that because a controller in government sounds like somebody who controls everything. So it's not really an appropriate government title. So we are Comptroller. So we need to have an unbiased analysis of our financial operations, and what we do as an independent controller, my job is to look at all of the big projects, look at the capital projects. The jail, for example, is a good example. The Comptroller's office before me has been doing several reports on the jail because it was the largest capital project in the history of Dutchess County, coming in at almost $200 million. That's something that you definitely want to report on. You definitely want to share, what kind of, what that spending looked like and whether it's on track. We provide an eye on our policies and procedures and our best practices. So for those of you who were here and heard Sue Serino here just a couple weeks ago, when I met with Sue the first time, I said, the reports that come out of the Comptroller's office make recommendations to improve the quality of the government. They're not to make it more Democratic or more Republican. It's just how do you have stronger policies and procedures so that you have a better government overall. And what I said to her was, all of the work that we're doing here, is really for the benefit of the overall organization, and we all win when government works better, and that was kind of how we started off, Sue and I. And when our offices put out a number of reports, I think the only ones that have had recommendations for the government have been for the sheriff so far. So, but we have a lot coming out soon. So we'll be working with Sue to make sure that those recommendations are implemented. But the idea is, we're not intuitively the best organization. Nobody is. So let's find out how to always be better, right? And even if you implement all of the recommendations of the reports that we do now, a couple years we might find that there's more to do and there's ways to be even better. This is an essential part of checks and balances, right? Like, I don't have any allegiance to the county executive or the county legislature, and what I'm doing is I'm just saying, hey, don't forget there's a thing over here that we need to be paying attention to. Hey guys, don't forget we said we would spend some money on this. And of course, we're always looking at the larger picture. What is the overall, well, kind of in two ways, really. What is the long-term health of the county's economy, and also the long-term health of the county government's finances. So you can imagine we're spending a lot of time right now looking at lots of different economic factors and trying to understand what those might mean for the economy, so that I can go back to finance and budget and say, hey, hold on, storms ahead, and we can all work together to figure these things out. But ultimately what it all comes down to is we weed out waste, abuse, and mismanagement. And to say that that's what we do does not mean that is what we have found. But let me talk about what that means and how we do that. So the Comptroller's office, the primary task of our office, you would never really see it in the news or anything, but it's called claims auditing. For those who we'll talk a little bit about it more on the next slide. But basically, every single payment that goes out of the county passes through the Comptroller's office, and we check to make sure that it is an appropriate payment. And that is what the team is doing all of the time, and we'll get into the details of that in a minute. If that claims auditing yields some patterns that we think are interesting, we might raise to that team and say, hey, we noticed that you guys have been submitting your invoices, but you're not submitting your proof of delivery, or you're submitting your invoices, but they don't seem to have a contract associated with them. We might go back and give them a little feedback and help them how to run their operation better. If there's a larger scale problem, we might do a report. We might say, hey, we need to actually take a look at this pattern that we're seeing and share that with the public. Information for the public is so we provide observations, findings, and recommendations as parts of our reports. And those are the reports that are back there. You can thumb through them and see what we've been doing this year. Information for the public. Like I said, everything in the Comptroller's office, everything in the county government belongs to you. It's yours. You just have to ask to know. You have to submit FOIL requests. What we do is we have unfettered access to all of the books. So what we can do is we can say, here's actually information that we think you might find important, because we have access to these things. We can put it together into a package that's interesting and informative, and that you might actually get some information out of. We review expenditures, so this is an important distinction here. So we deal with all of the money going out, and the finance department deals with all of the money coming in. I mean, we can do reports on finance, and we do. And we have a sales tax report back there that you can take a look at, and we'll even talk about a little bit later. But usually we have to have the cooperation of the finance department in order to do a deep dive into money coming into the county. And we are a team of 13, including myself. So you have me, a deputy controller, director of audit and control, executive assistant, Alana, who's in the back. Thank you, Alana, for helping get this set up. And then we have our auditors and account clerks. So claims auditing. So like I said, this is the primary task of the Comptroller's office. Every single outgoing payment. As of 7/18/25, we've processed 15,000 plus invoices already. And you can find where all those payments are going on the Comptroller's website. We've been publishing a monthly taxpayer's checkbook, so you can see all of the vendors that have been receiving funding, how many invoices they submitted, and invoices submitted in the checkbook, and the amount that we paid that month. Yeah. And we approve all purchase orders and vouchers, which are essentially commitments to pay. So a purchase order says, we're going to use this contract now to buy 250 units of X, Y, and Z, and we process all of those. relatively new here, we review all of the contracts for proper configuration. So typically what has happened for years is that the controller's office doesn't review a contract against a payment until the day that we receive the invoice. So someone gives us a bill and we look at it and we say, all right, let me just make sure that this invoice is covered by a contract that we have with this organization. If we find that no contract is registered or that there's an error, we kick that back and we say, sorry, you either need to get a contract, modify a contract, or do any number of things in order for us to process this payment. Not because we're obstinate, but because there are rules. And when we do this, sometimes we're delaying payment to one of our partners. And for like our nonprofit partners who always have cash flow issues, it doesn't seem like a really fair way to go about doing an important checks and balance. Your checks and balances shouldn't hurt any of your partners. So what we did this year is we got a new step added to the process where when a contract is first created, we will then review the contract and make sure that it was set up appropriately. I do not have veto power over contracts. I can't tell Sue Serino that she can have this contract or not that contract. What we do, everything is about, is it done appropriately and is it done by the books, right? It's not political. And of course, we review all budget transfers when teams are moving money around, and we look at all of the legislative resolutions where there's going to be references to general account lines. Related to these auditing tasks, we look at payroll, we look at county payroll, we look at Board of Elections payroll, which is like poll workers and stuff, employee allowances, so you've got some CSEA employees that are entitled to like steel-toed boots, for example. And we look at all P cards. P cards are essentially procurement cards where our commissioners can go out and make purchases outside of our financial transaction system. The part of the controller's office that I think is most familiar with the public is the audit and the audit reporting that we do. Now, I just before we get into this, I want to talk a little bit about what does it mean to do an audit report, because as controller, I am inevitably in a political environment doing non-political work. And what happens with these is, people are like, oh, he's going to audit you as a way to get you. It's like a gotcha game. Anybody who's worked in finance knows that an audit is a gift. An audit is a benefit for you to firm things up for yourself. So the way that I approach audits and reports is, what is the way, what can I say and what can we review that would help us have better government, right? And none of these reports would ever point a finger at an individual, right? It's always about processes. So when we have observations and findings and recommendations, they don't refer to people, they refer to processes and systems and figures and such, So we do different types of reports. So the first we do are informational reports. Typically a special report would be something that is exploring a topic that is very important to Dutchess County's finances or to the public interest. And what we do is we tell that story with the hope that something may be gleaned from it. So a recent special report we did was our closeout of the American Rescue Plan, the COVID-19 funding. We'll talk a little bit about that later. So we just kind of did an overview of here's how the money was used. When folks got really upset about what was going on with the OMB memo and some of the executive orders earlier in the year, and people were contacting us and asking us, is everything okay at the county? We just put out a report and said, here's how federal dollars are used at the county, right? A controller's report is a report that I write myself, that I work on. Yes, I do work on reports myself. Most recent one from my desk is the Youth Opportunity Union, which we'll talk about. And then an important informational report that Alana and I are working on right now is the People's Annual Financial Report, which is kind of a layman-friendly review of our 2024 budgets, our budget story and some other related data. I'm very excited for that one. But then an audit report is a little more detailed, a little more rigorous, and this is usually chosen because of something that we have witnessed with financial operations. We have a grant program here that's mentioned, LPC. LPC is a unique program in that money went out at the beginning of the program as opposed to the end. In government, typically, we don't pay until goods and services have already been delivered, right? And with this grant, money was given up front, as it probably should have. In COVID-19, they were trying to keep a bunch of youth services programs afloat. And so, but it raises some financial operations questions, so we wanted to look into them. We look at contract agencies, so a lot of the nonprofit partners that contract with Dutchess County to provide services, because county funds are flowing through those organizations, we want to make sure that they are managing our money well and that they have tight operations. We look at major capital projects, as I mentioned before. We have mandated reports, but we also kind of look at these things, and let me see if I cover this on the next slide. If there's a change in leadership, for example, District Attorney Anthony Parisi, when he came into office, he was the first new Attorney General or District Attorney for quite a long time. And so he said to the Comptroller at that time, Greg Pulver, he said, please audit me. Please look at the books. Please tell me what I need to improve. I want to get off to a nice fresh start here. And we typically do that. So when I went around and I introduced myself to all the commissioners earlier this year when I started, I said, what can I audit for you? What would you like me to look into for you? Because I can provide information that can help you. And in some cases, they took me up on the request. So, other things we do in the office. So we can do public surveys. So we were collecting a lot of information earlier this year about institutions or individuals who lost federal funding or a federal job, because there was a lot of uncertainty earlier in this year. That seems to have slowed down a little bit, but we did, in the end, I think, have about $12.5 million of cuts. We do vendor management. So we manage, when I say we, I mean Alana, manages that we're doing electronic deposit for everybody. We really don't like to do paper checks anymore. We do tax forms at the beginning of the year. We coordinate with the Office of the State Comptroller. I'm sorry, usually when we do town halls, we have the Office of the State Comptroller here because they do unclaimed funds. If the power company was trying to refund you money years ago, 20 years ago. But usually we have winners. You'll have to come to the Rhinebeck one on Wednesday if you want to do unclaimed funds with OSC. We do FOIL requests pertaining to the functions of our department. I'm also the chair of the Independent Auditing Committee. We just had our closeout meeting for the 2024 audited financials. So the 2024 audited financials will be coming out very soon with a managerial report. And then we do public events and information sessions like we're doing today. So let's start talking about some of the reports and what we've been finding this year. So, like I said, an OMB memo came out shortly after the inauguration in Washington, some executive orders that were saying to cease disbursement of federal dollars. And the phone was ringing off the hook. People were asking me, what's going on? How's the county impacted? And I said, well, as comptroller, I look backwards, not forwards. My job is to look at things that have already been done to see what we can learn from to do better going forward. I don't prescribe policy. I don't get into policy arguments. I don't predict things. What we do is we say, here's what has already happened. So people were saying, well, what's going to happen? I said, I don't know, but what I can tell you is how much federal funding we have spent year to year. So people wanted to know how much federal money we got, and I said, that's the wrong question. For example, COVID-19 money, we get $57 million in 2021 and 2022. We can spend them for another 2 years after that. So we actually closed out COVID-19 in December 2024. So if I said, here's how much money we get, it wouldn't tell a very interesting picture. But what we did have from our annual financials is we had something that is an overview of our expenditures of federal awards, our schedule of expenditures of federal awards, and we had that audited already for 21-23, so we summarized that and gave that back to the public to say, here's an understanding of where the money is. I can't tell you what's going to happen, but this is where the money is. What we learned was that Dutchess County spends about $65 million a year. This year, I think in the 2024 audited financials, I think they found it was $67 million. 2/3 of the money that we spend is Health and Human Services, from the Health and Human Services Department in Washington, D.C. In the top 5 programs that are funded with federal dollars are TANF, which is kind of the replacement for welfare with the work requirement from the 90s. Public transit, which is for it's for equipment and it's for bus stops. home energy assistance, the medical assistance program, and adoption assistance. When we did this report, we also looked into how much Dutchess County residents are taking in as far as entitlements. That's Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, veterans insurance, and a few others. And what it came out to was $3.25 billion coming in. So when we hear about the potential for entitlement cuts or restrictions on entitlements, yes, we're worried. You know, I can't say what is going to happen. You know, other elected officials out there are putting up, you know, these big cards that say, here's how many people are going to be impacted and here's how much money. Those are all estimates. We don't know what it's going to mean. But what I do know is that any percentage of $3.25 billion, any percent reduction to that number would have an effect on our economy. That's a fact. That's a big number. Other reports from this year, we did a report on the American Rescue Plan. This is the final report. So we received $57 million for COVID-19 from the U.S. Treasury. And this came in 21 and 22. In 21, then County Executive Mark Molinaro had a plan for ARP called Dutchess Invests. And that program has kind of been the COVID-19 plan since 2021. Every year it has had significant changes. In fact, of the original plan that was created and submitted to the U.S. Treasury, only 54% of that original plan was executed. And the reason was because there were projects that were getting added to the plan that were not appropriate for the grant. So you had, for example, the Housing Trust Fund. The Housing Trust Fund can't come out of our COVID-19 money. First of all, it's going to be money that's spent after 2024, the lifetime of the grant, but also it's not really an appropriate use of the funding. There was a lot of great work done, and it's exactly what COVID-19 relief was intended for. Youth enrichment, you know, keeping some, some of the partners who are working with our young people afloat. Park improvements, you know, these are all the kinds of things you want to see. But there was some stuff in there that I didn't agree with, and I didn't think was particularly a good investment. And there was some real estate projects, which we'll get more into later, and we'll have some reports coming out about. And stadium improvements. This was, when we say stadium improvements, we're referring to Heritage Financial Park in the town of Fishkill. Some of our COVID-19 money was used for like batting cages and lights and turfing the field and those kinds of things. One of the more recent reports we had out was the report that I wrote about the Youth Opportunity Union. We were getting in county legislature meetings, there were some folks coming out and asking questions about the 26 Oakley Street homeless shelter project, which I don't know if many of you know about, but essentially there's a homeless shelter that's going to be built for 100 single males in downtown Poughkeepsie, and people got really upset about it and came out and they said, you know, oh, the county can move mountains to build a jail downtown, to build a homeless shelter downtown, whatever happened to our community center. And I went back and I said, what community center are we talking about? It turned out it was this thing that had been in the ARP funding, in the COVID-19 funding, called the Youth Opportunity Union. So we actually did a report on this because when we dug into it, we thought it was a very interesting story that we could all learn from. So basically, the YMCA of Dutchess County was derelict from 2009 onwards and had been laying fallow for 10 years. Efforts by the city of Poughkeepsie to rehabilitate that property, which had a deed restriction on it for recreation, really went nowhere. And so the county executive at the time purchased the property for $10 and signed a deal with the city of Poughkeepsie that committed a $25 million appropriation to tear down the old YMCA and to build a new project called the Youth Opportunity Union. So the $25 million appropriation never actually happened. $8.5 million was appropriated, and of that only $4.5 million was spent. $2 million was spent to demolish the old YMCA, and then the rest of it was used basically for planning the new building, but the new building never came about. So, you know, we looked into, you know, what was going on here. You know, it seems that, you know, $25 million was never going to cover the cost of the project. In fact, the smallest version of the project that I have ever seen is over $40 million. When they went out to the architect originally and they said, you know, I guess they had an idea that there were going to be a lot of nonprofit partners that were going to be involved here, but they basically went out and said, you know, build us, we want to build a cathedral to children, like give us something really grand. And the architect came back with a project that would cost $165 million, which it would have been irresponsible to bond for that. I just don't think that we could have handled that kind of debt servicing. This would have had to have come from nonprofit partners. But in all the documents that I went through, I never saw a fundraising plan. I never really saw a practicable plan where this was going to be funded and constructed. So we put together a report that just kind of told the story, you know. And I actually think that this report is becoming kind of an illustrative example of what the Comptroller's Office actually does. So, you know, I was trying to like dispel this idea that an audit is like a to bludgeon someone or, you know, to attack someone, and it's not. What happened here was a commitment was made by the county government to the people in 2021, and that commitment wasn't held in 2020, and that commitment wasn't held. So what happens is 5 years go by and the controller comes along and says, hey everybody, don't forget, you promised the city of Poughkeepsie you were going to build this thing, this is what you said it was going to be, and we do this report. And what happened was within 4 days after the report came out, Sue Serino, to her credit, had the site cleaned up and went to the city of Poughkeepsie and started renegotiating the U. Now, someone could make the case that I scored political points, or someone could make the case that Sue is, you know, it's none of that. This is when everybody's doing their part, this is how the government should function. This is the right way. This isn't about pointing fingers. This is about me just kind of giving a gentle nudge and saying, promises were made and promises weren't kept. Let's get back on track with this project. So some of the recent reports we had come out, we had a report on the jail commissary. This is a report that we do every 2 years. Not a particularly exciting one, but it's about the commissary, it's about the inmate accounts. So inmates can purchase things from the commissary. They have the money that they gave to, that was in their pockets when they entered jail. They get that money out, you know, when they leave jail. So we monitor those accounts because there's a lot of money moving around outside of our systems. And then we have an exciting report that we put out called Maintenance in Lieu of Rent. It's not an exciting report. It's a very technical report. But if you're interested in the Maintenance in Lieu of Rent report, please come talk to me after this meeting and bring me your resume. Like the Maintenance in Lieu of Rent report, we have our indirect cost allocation plan coming out soon, and this determines our indirect costs for grants and other projects. We have a big report coming up on the Justice and Transition Center because we haven't updated on that in a while. So the Justice and Transition Center it's the jail, and it's the whole kind of campus there, the law enforcement center, etc. The Justice and Transition Center, the Comptroller's Office has not done a report for a year just because activity has kind of slowed down, but the project's not done because on the property are these, they're called pods. I don't know if anybody's heard about these, but they're basically being used for homeless shelter now. They're way past their usable life. They're at risk of catastrophic failure, but they are still there, and homeless people are still living in them. And underneath that parking lot where the pods are is where they need to do all the water and storm water management and basically finish the project. So in order to finish the Justice and Transition Center, we actually need to have a solution. We need to have beds for all the homeless folks that are staying there and get them off the property, remove the pods, and then start digging again and finish the project. We're going to do an update on this. We also have a report coming out soon. There's been a review of all of our capital projects going on over time, over 3 controllers, and part 3 is coming out soon, and that's about how much we're spending to service all of our debt. And we have many more reports on our website right now, and many more on the way. We're a team of we have 6 auditors, and everybody's assigned at least 2 audits at any time, and I write reports as well. We have a lot coming out. Okay, and so let me just back up a little bit here and just share some basic information about our budget. So in 2024, the adopted budget for Dutchess County was $600 million, $601 million. What ended up happening was we spent $568 million. There's an interesting story to tell in 2024 where basically I'm trying to think how this. So in 2023, there was a vote to increase the sales tax rate in Dutchess County by 0.25%. And for a sales tax increase to go through, it actually has to be approved in Albany. It's a home rule vote, it's called. The home rule vote was never taken. I didn't dig in to find out whatever happened, but my guess is that it was an election year and nobody in Albany wanted to pass a sales tax increase. But who knows? But the point is that it never happened. So the 2024 budget was built around a sales tax rate that never existed. So there was a projection of sales tax revenue that was never going to happen. Now, what's to the credit of the budget director in Dutchess County, she estimated sales taxes conservatively, so we only fell short by $3 million on our sales tax collection at the old rate. But what that meant was that there was a lot of other things needed to happen, and fortunately there was state and federal revenues were a little higher last year, and they made a real effort to bring down spending last year. This year's budget is $629 million. It's based on the accurate sales tax rate. It is a conservative estimate of sales taxes. What we're finding so far year to date is, I think the projection was a 1.5% increase in sales tax revenue between 24 and 25. And what we're finding is actually we're a little behind 2024 right now. People are kind of withdrawing what they're spending a little bit, and we're watching that progress more and more. It didn't exist in the beginning of the year, but we're seeing more and more of it month by month. So this is an overall picture of our revenue. So you'll see our sales taxes here are $270 million, and our real property taxes are down here at 85. Now, what happens here is you have basically of our tax profile, ignoring aid from the state and the federal government, of our tax profile, we're collecting 3 times as much in sales taxes basically as we are in property taxes. Well, you might think that sounds like a really great thing, but if you're in the budgeting business, that sounds like a nightmare. And the reason is because property tax, I can estimate and predict, and I can tell you what I'm going to collect next year. Sales tax is up to you. I don't know what's on your mind, whether you need a dishwasher or a car, or you're holding off on those things. 3/4 of our tax profile is based on consumer sentiment. So that makes us really exposed to boom and bust cycles. If we were to have an economic downturn, Dutchess County would take a real special hit. Of the way that we spend our money, here's kind of like all the overall categories. This is the Sheriff's Department here. Economic assistance and opportunity is mostly our social services. We have health and mental health up here. General government support is what you would kind of call your indirect costs, the administrative costs.
And is our income from the sales tax, is that unusual?
No, it's
our Dutchess County is doing something different than most other counties.
It's actually very common in this region.
Okay.
And I don't have a prescription for it because that's not really what I'm in the business of doing, but what I can tell you is if I'm trying to figure out what our economic outlook is, this is a big asterisk. And we thank you, Lynn and Lisa and the library for hosting us. I really appreciate it. It's a really great series.